I sat alone with one cupcake, one candle, and my late wife's birthday card beside my coffee. I was not asking for a party. I was not asking for money. I only texted my son, "Dinner at 6, if you can make it." 3 minutes later, his reply lit up my phone. "Dad, stop begging for attention. It's just a birthday." I looked at the empty chair across from me. Then I pressed my finger against the little candle flame instead of blowing it out, because there was nobody there to sing anyway. That was when my phone buzzed again. Not my son. The bank. Business card activity. Bellamy Safe Steps and home access. Then another alert came in. Guarantor renewal reminder. Action required. Before 9 a.m. Welcome to Final Act Revenge. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. And if you are watching late tonight, please take care of your health, drink some water, and stay with me. Back then, I thought my son had only forgotten my birthday. I did not know he had also forgotten. His business still lived on my signature. My name is Kareem Bellamy. I was 73 years old when my son learned the difference between needing a father and respecting one. For nearly 40 years, I worked inside credit unions. Not the exciting side of money, the careful side. Loan files, guarantor agreements, renewal dates, spending categories, risk notes, signatures. I was the man people came to when a loan looked clean on the surface but smelled wrong underneath. I used to tell younger officers, credit is trust, written in numbers. Most of them smiled when I said it. Then they stayed long enough to learn I was right. My wife, Eleanor, understood trust in a softer language. She worked at the public library here in Greenville, South Carolina. She ran senior reading circles, afternoon movie programs, and little paperwork tables for people who were embarrassed to admit they could not understand a hospital bill or a bank letter. She never made anyone feel small. That was her gift. After she passed, the quiet in my house became heavier than furniture. Her reading glasses stayed on the side table for months. Her favorite cardigan hung behind the bedroom door. And every year on my birthday, I still carried the last card she wrote me. Inside, she had written, "Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance." I wish I had listened sooner. My son, Preston, started Bellamy Safe Steps and home access after Eleanor fell in our bathroom and scared us both half to death. The company was supposed to help older people stay safe at home. Grab bars, stair rails, small ramps, bathroom fixtures that kept a person from losing independence over one bad step. At first, Preston meant it. I believe that. He came to me with drawings, supplier estimates, and a notebook full of names from Eleanor's library programs. He said, "Dad, I want to build something Mom would be proud of." So I lent him the one thing banks trust more than a dream: my name. Palmetto Ridge Credit Union approved a business line of credit for $185,000. I agreed to guarantee it, but not blindly. I had spent too many years watching love become bad paperwork. I made sure the file said exactly what the money was for: payroll, inventory, approved vendors, accessibility equipment, operating costs tied to real installations, not private dinners, not club dues, not pretty photographs of success before the work was paid for. Preston agreed to all of it. He hugged me in the parking lot that day and said, "I won't let you down." I believed him because I wanted to. That is how parents get hurt sometimes, not because we are foolish, because we remember the child before we study the adult. For a while, the business did good work. Older women got rails near their bathtubs. A retired bus driver got a ramp after knee surgery. Eleanor's name appeared on a small brochure, and I did not mind, because the work still matched her heart. Then the world got tighter. Materials cost more. Insurance cost more. Customers took longer to pay. Preston began speaking like a man who was always one contract away from breathing again. His wife, Tessa, understood appearances better than numbers. She called it branding, visibility, trust building. She said important clients needed to see success before they believed in it. I called it spending tomorrow's money to impress people today. But I stayed quiet too often. Because Preston was my son. Because Eleanor would have wanted me to be patient. Because a father can mistake repeated rescue for loyalty. That was my mistake. I lent Preston my name because I believed he was building something Eleanor would have blessed. What I did not know was that one day he would use that same name to build a life he did not want me to see. I stayed in that diner longer than I should have. Not because I thought Preston would walk through the door. By then, I knew he would not. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting the evening was over. And a man can be foolishly loyal to a booth when it is the last place his wife used to save for him. Cora Baines came by with the coffee pot. Cora had worked that diner long enough to know which customers wanted conversation and which ones only needed someone to keep the cup warm. She had known Eleanor too. Every birthday, my wife would call ahead and ask Cora to hold the corner booth. "Want me to box the cupcake, Mr. Bellamy?" Cora asked. I looked at the little thing sitting on the plate. White frosting, one candle, a few blue sprinkles because Eleanor always said blue made cheap desserts look cheerful. "Not yet," I said. Cora nodded like that answer made sense. Kind people do that. They let your dignity stay seated with you a little longer. My phone buzzed again. For 1 second, I thought Preston had changed his mind. That is the humiliating thing about love. Even after someone cuts you, part of you still waits for them to come back with a bandage. But it was not my son. It was another bank alert. Business card purchase. Crescent Club dining room. $612.40. I read it twice. Crescent Club was not a supplier. It was not a payroll account. It was not a handrail vendor or a ramp fabricator. It was a private dining room where men went to make small businesses look bigger than they were. I set the phone down slowly. Then it buzzed again. This time, it was my granddaughter, Maisie. A picture came through. Preston stood under a banner that said, "Safe Steps, Growth Dinner." He was smiling, one hand on Tessa's back, the other holding a glass of something that cost more than my cupcake. Tessa looked polished and bright beside him, wearing the expression of a woman who knew exactly which angle made struggle look like success. Around them were people I did not know, a few suits, a few plates, a little stage lighting. And my son looked proud. Maisie's message came right under the photo. "Grandpa, I thought Dad said we were too busy for dinner." I stared at those words for a long time. Too busy. That was the version Preston had given his daughter. Not that Grandpa was begging for attention. Not that a birthday was nothing. Too busy. Children often get the edited version of adult cruelty. I typed back slowly. "It's all right, sweetheart. Enjoy your evening." Then I erased "enjoy your evening." That sounded too false. I sent only, "I love you, Maisie." She replied with a heart. Small thing. Still enough to hurt. Cora came back and saw my face. "Everything okay?" I turned the phone screen down. "No," I said, "but it's quiet enough." She did not ask what that meant. Good waitresses and good bankers have one thing in common. They know when a man is not ready to explain the numbers yet. Across town, Preston was telling a room full of strangers about growth. I found that out later. He spoke about helping seniors stay independent. He used phrases like community trust, home safety, and aging with dignity. He thanked Tessa for elevating the brand. He probably mentioned Eleanor too, because her name made people soften. That was the part I could not shake. My wife had spent years helping older people read letters they were afraid to open. She sat with widows at library tables and made them feel human before they felt confused. She never polished suffering into a sales pitch. But there was Preston, smiling under a banner paid for by a card tied to my guarantee, while I sat alone with the birthday he had called attention-seeking. I am not a jealous man. I did not need a club dinner. I did not need a toast. What I needed was honesty. If my son had said, "Dad, I'm in trouble," I would have listened. If he had said, The business is slipping, I would have opened every file with him. If he had said, "I'm ashamed I still need you," I might have understood that too. But he did not say any of that. He told me to stop begging. Then he spent my trust in public. A few minutes later, another alert arrived. Event services deposit, Palmetto Floral and Lighting, $1,180. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I had spent my life watching people rename spending until it sounded useful. Flowers became client atmosphere. Dinner became relationship development. A leased car became mobile branding. A family loan became belief. And neglect became busyness. I finally picked up the cupcake. The frosting had gone a little stiff. I asked Cora for a box. She brought one without a word and slipped an extra napkin inside. On the napkin, she had written, "Eleanor would want you to take it home." That nearly did me in. Not Preston's text. Not the bank alert. That one sentence from a waitress who remembered my wife. I paid the check in cash because old habits comfort old men. Then I walked out into the warm Greenville night with the cupcake box in one hand and my phone in the other. On the drive home, Maisie's photo stayed in my mind. Preston smiling, Tessa glowing, safe steps shining behind them. My son had not forgotten family that night. He had simply chosen the version of family that looked better under lights. I drove home with the cupcake box on the passenger seat. That was the saddest part, somehow. Not the text, not the club charge, the cupcake. It sat there under the streetlights like a small witness nobody had asked for. White cardboard, one little grease spot in the corner. Cora's napkin folded on top with Eleanor's name written in blue ink. When I got home, I did not turn on the television. I did not call Preston. I did not write some long, angry message that would let him pretend I was emotional and he was reasonable. I put the cupcake on the kitchen table. Then I took Eleanor's birthday card from my coat pocket and set it beside it. For a while, I just stood there. The house was quiet in the way a house gets quiet after grief has lived there too long. The refrigerator hummed, the clock clicked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and gave up. I opened the drawer beside the sink and pulled out my old bank ledger. Most people keep memories in photo albums. I kept some of mine in columns. Dates, amounts, notes, pencil marks, careful lines. A record of what happened when people later claimed they could not remember. I sat down and wrote the first line. Birthday cupcake, $3.49. Then I paused. Under notes, I wrote, emotional cost, not deductible. Eleanor would have laughed at that. Then I opened my phone and began listing the alerts. Crescent Club Dining Room, $612.40. Palmetto Floral and Lighting, $1,180. A boutique signage deposit from 3 days earlier, $740. A vehicle wrap charge marked marketing visibility, $2,300 pending. None of those were grab bars. None were stair rails. None were bathroom safety fixtures for seniors who were afraid of falling at 2 in the morning. I had spent my career reading numbers that wanted to be excuses. These numbers were no different. They had been dressed up. Business development, brand trust, client education, community visibility, pretty names. But money always tells you where loyalty went. I pulled up older alerts from the last few weeks. There they were. Small at first. A lunch here, a dinner there. Printing charges that seemed high. A social media consultant invoice. A club membership fee that had been split across 2 transactions, as if cutting a lie in half made it lighter. Then the vendor delays appeared. Buck Laramie Handrail Supply. Payment past due. That one made me sit back. Buck was not fancy. He ran a small supply shop outside Greenville and answered his own phone. Men like Buck did not float unpaid invoices for long unless somebody had begged for time. Bellamy Safe Steps was supposed to pay people like Buck before anyone paid for flowers at Crescent Club. I turned another page in the ledger. Then I saw it. A pending late-night draw request. $38,500. Marked Equipment Reserve. No invoice attached, no supplier name, no job number. Just a clean label sitting over a dirty question. I stared at that number for a long time. $38,500 is not a mistake you make with your thumb. It is not a dinner receipt. It is not an oops charge on a business card. That kind of money means someone is trying to get ahead of a door before it closes. And I knew which door. The guarantor renewal was due by morning. My confirmation, my name, my signature. The one thing my son had not mocked. Not yet. I opened the original file in my desk cabinet. Palmetto Ridge Credit Union. Bellamy Safe Steps and Home Access. Line of credit agreement, guarantor notes. My handwriting sat in the margins from years before. Approved use only. Annual review required. Notify guarantor on category mismatch. I remembered writing those notes when Preston still looked at me like a father and not like a funding source. I remembered Eleanor squeezing my hand under the table after he left the bank that day. "Help him," she had said, "but don't disappear inside the help." That was Eleanor. Soft heart, clear eyes. I wish I had kept both parts of that sentence equally. My phone buzzed again. For a second, I thought it might be Preston finally saying he was sorry. It was not. It was a reminder from Palmetto Ridge. Guarantor renewal pending. I put the phone face up beside the cupcake and the card. 3 things on the table. A birthday nobody came to. A wife who had warned me gently. A bank that still knew how to ask permission. I took my pencil and wrote one more line in the ledger. 11:57 p.m. Borrower pattern no longer matches purpose of credit. Then, underneath it, do not confuse need with respect. That line hurt, because I had confused them for years. Preston needed me when he opened the business, needed me when the first supplier wanted better terms, needed me when cash flow tightened, needed me when his confidence ran ahead of his books. But needing your father is not the same as honoring him, and needing a signature is not the same as loving the man behind it. I closed the ledger just after midnight, not because I was finished, because I finally understood what I was looking at. I was no longer looking at a son who forgot my birthday. I was looking at a borrower who had forgotten the bank would ask me one question before sunrise. I slept badly that night, not because I was angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger burns hot, then leaves you tired. What kept me awake was the ledger sitting on my kitchen table like a quiet witness, with all those numbers lined up in pencil, refusing to explain themselves politely. At 6:38 in the morning, my phone rang. I was already dressed. Old banking habits never leave you. When money is moving wrong, you do not sleep in. The caller ID said, Palmetto Ridge Credit Union. I let it ring twice before answering. Kareem Bellamy. A woman's voice came through, careful and familiar. Mr. Bellamy, it's Diane Harlow. I sat down slowly. Diane had been a young loan officer when I still worked there. Sharp mind, calm hands. The kind of banker who did not get excited when a file smelled bad. She simply opened it wider. Diane, I said. You're calling early. Yes, sir. I wish I were calling socially. That told me enough. I looked at Eleanor's birthday card beside the cupcake box. What did you find? She exhaled softly. Mr. Bellamy, your name is still protecting a loan your son is no longer respecting. There are sentences that make a room colder. That was one of them. Diane did not dramatize. She did not need to. She walked me through the file like a surgeon reading an X-ray. Bellamy Safe Steps had a late-night draw request, pending for $38,500. The label was Equipment Reserve, but there was no matching invoice, no supplier number, no signed purchase order. Then came the card activity: Crescent Club dining, event lighting, brand photography, vehicle wrap deposit, private catering, and several charges from Tessa Bellamy's authorized card that did not fit approved operating categories. I rubbed my thumb against the edge of the ledger. Any vendor issues? A pause. That pause hurt more than a quick yes. Buck Laramie Handrail Supply has 2 unpaid invoices past term, Diane said. There's also a delayed payment note connected to a bathroom rail installation backlog. I closed my eyes. Eleanor would have cared about that part first. Not the dinner, not the club, the handrails. Older people waiting for something steady to hold on to while my son paid for lighting under a banner. Payroll? I asked. Potentially tight if the draw does not clear, Diane said, but there may be a controlled path if documentation supports it. That mattered. I was not trying to punish employees. I was not trying to leave an old woman without a rail in her bathroom because my son had hurt my feelings. This was not about hurt feelings anymore. It was about misuse. Renewal is due today, Diane continued. The unrestricted guarantor confirmation is still pending. The system requires your confirmation before 9. I looked at the clock. 7:04. Plenty of time for a man to make the wrong decision out of guilt. Before I tell you what Diane found in that credit file, let me ask you something. If your own child called your birthday begging for attention, then needed your signature to keep his business alive the next morning, would you still sign? Tell me in the comments, because I think many parents know what it feels like to be ignored emotionally and needed financially. Diane lowered her voice. There is something else. I already knew. Old files have shadows. If you have worked enough of them, you can feel when one more page is waiting. You mean the addendum, I said. Yes, sir. The annual guarantor review condition. I remembered that document clearly. I had insisted on it when Preston first opened the line. Not because I expected him to betray me, because pressure tests people, good people, proud people, people who start with purpose and slowly begin calling shortcuts survival. Diane said, "You wrote this condition carefully." I wrote it so nobody could confuse family support with unlimited access. And under that condition, she said, you can decline unrestricted renewal if fund usage no longer matches approved purpose. The kitchen went very still. A father hears one thing in that sentence. A banker hears another. The father hears, "Your son is in trouble." The banker hears, "The file is doing exactly what it was built to do." I asked, "What happens if I do not confirm?" Further draws freeze pending review. Questionable card activity can be suspended. The late-night draw remains on hold. We can discuss controlled disbursement for verified payroll and vendor invoices, but Preston would lose open access until the review is resolved. Good, I said. The word surprised even me. Not because I wanted my son cornered, because for the first time all night, the system had found a door between mercy and stupidity. Diane was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Mr. Bellamy, Preston called the branch message line before closing last night. He said you were planning to sign in the morning." I looked at the phone. There it was, the old habit, using my expected kindness as if it were already permission. "He did not ask me," I said. "I understand." "No," I said quietly. "He assumed me." Diane did not argue. Good bankers know when a customer has just named the problem better than the file did. I picked up Eleanor's card and read the line again. "Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance." My son had made my loneliness sound like a defect. Then he had used my name like a bridge he could cross without looking back. "Diane," I said, "do not process unrestricted renewal without my direct confirmation." "Yes, sir." "And prepare whatever is needed to protect verified payroll and vendor obligations only." "I can do that." I looked at the cupcake box, still unopened from the night before. "Then we do this clean." After I hung up, I wrote one line in the ledger. 7:22 a.m. Renewal not automatic. Guarantor still alive. Then I sat there with my pencil in hand, realizing Diane had not needed to remind me what that clause meant. I had written it myself, back when I still believed I would never need it against my own son. Preston called at 7:46. I remember the exact minute because I wrote it down. Old habits. When a call comes after a bank warning, you do not treat it like family chatter. You treat it like part of the file. His name filled my phone screen while Eleanor's birthday card lay open on the table beside the ledger. For a few seconds, I just watched it ring. A father waits for one sentence. Not a perfect sentence, not a speech. Just one small human thing. "Happy birthday, Dad. I'm sorry. I should have come." I answered on the fourth ring. "Morning, Preston." His voice came fast. "Dad, did the bank call you yet?" There it was. No birthday, no diner, no empty chair. The loan came first. I looked at the cupcake box on the table and felt something inside me settle into a colder shape. "You remembered the loan before you remembered your father," I said. He sighed like I was making things difficult. "Dad, please don't do that. Not today." I almost laughed. "It was my birthday yesterday. Today seems to be yours." Silence. Then his tone changed. Softer. Careful. The voice he used when he wanted me to feel responsible without saying he needed help. "Look, there's a renewal thing. It's routine. Diane might have made it sound bigger than it is." "Did she?" "She's compliance. They always make everything sound like a fire." I had trained Diane Harlow myself. If she smelled smoke, I trusted there was something burning. Preston kept talking. "We've got a supplier window, payroll coming up, and a senior living contract that could turn everything around. If the draw gets held, it creates problems." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that don't need to happen if you just confirm what you already agreed to." That sentence told me plenty. Just confirm. As if my signature were a light switch he could ask me to flip from another room. I said, "The draw request says equipment reserve. Diane says there's no invoice attached." He paused. A short pause. The kind borrowers think lenders do not hear. "We're finalizing paperwork." "Preston." "What?" "Do not use a soft word for a missing document." He breathed hard into the phone. Then I heard Tessa in the background. "Put him on speaker." I closed my eyes. Of course. The moment a man cannot move his father, he invites the person who helped him practice the argument. Preston said, "Dad, Tessa's here." I gathered that. Her voice came through bright and controlled. "Kareem, good morning. I know this is stressful, but Preston is trying to grow something meaningful." "Meaningful things still need receipts." She ignored that. "We had a client development dinner last night. That's how relationships work now. People want to see confidence before they trust a company with their parents' homes." I looked at Eleanor's card. "Your mother helped seniors read the fine print," I said. "She did not lend her name to hide it." Tessa went quiet, only for a second. Then she recovered. "That is unfair." "No," I said. "It is inconvenient. Those are different." Preston cut back in, sharper now. "We're not stealing anything. We're building the company. You helped start this, Dad." There it was, the hook behind the plea. You helped. So you owe. "You built this with me," he said. "You don't get to walk away when it gets hard." That one landed, because part of it was true. I had sat with him in the bank office. I had reviewed the first projections. I had told him older people needed safe bathrooms more than fancy brochures. I had let myself believe that helping him was a way of keeping Eleanor's kindness alive. But a true thing can still be used like a weapon. "I am not walking away because it is hard," I said. "I am stepping back because you started hiding what hard looked like." Preston's voice dropped. "You don't understand what it's like. Every month costs more. Materials, labor, insurance. Customers pay slow. Vendors want cash. Everybody says they support small business until the bill is due. I understand pressure." "No, Dad, you understand rules." That hurt more than he meant it to, or maybe exactly as much. Because that was how Preston had started seeing me. Not as the father who stayed late helping him read supplier terms. not as the man who put his own name behind a business dream, a rule, an obstacle, a signature with a conscience attached. Before I could answer, another voice entered the call, male, rougher, businesslike. "Mr. Bellamy, this is Wes Dalton." I sat straighter. Wes was Preston's operations partner, though partner was a generous word. He was the kind of man who knew how to sound practical while standing near someone else's risk. "Wes," I said. "I'm not trying to get in family business," he said, immediately getting in family business. "But if this renewal stalls, we miss the supplier window. Payroll gets ugly, installations get pushed, people get hurt." People get hurt. That was the pressure point. They had finally found the cleanest way to make my boundary look cruel. I thought of Nora Finch, the office manager who probably knew the payroll calendar better than Preston did. I thought of Buck Laramie waiting on payment for handrail supplies. I thought of an older woman somewhere expecting someone to install rails before her next fall. Then I thought of Crescent Club. Flowers, lighting, $600 for dinner under a banner. "I have no interest in hurting employees or customers," I said. Wes answered too quickly. "Then renew." "No," I said. "Then document." The call went still. That was a compliance word, and men who live on vague urgency do not like documentation. Preston said, "Dad, please. We used Mom's message because it helps people trust the brand. That is not some crime." I felt my hand close around the pencil. My wife's name is not a brand asset. She believed in helping seniors. She believed in helping them. Not impressing them with dinners paid for by money meant to make their homes safer. Tessa said, "You are making this emotional." I looked at the cupcake box. No, Tessa. Emotional was sitting alone with one candle while my son told me to stop begging for attention. This is financial. Nobody spoke. For the first time, they had no polished phrase ready. Then Preston said the thing that ended whatever softness I had left that morning. "You like being needed, Dad. Don't pretend this isn't part of it." I looked down at Eleanor's handwriting. "Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance." I had been called lonely, controlling, overly careful, now needy. All because I had not yet given them the signature they expected. My voice stayed calm when I answered. "That is a dangerous thing to say to the man whose name is still holding your door open." Preston breathed hard. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It is a balance sheet." I ended the call before he could turn fear into another accusation. The kitchen became quiet again. But it was not the same quiet as the night before. This one had a decision inside it. I opened the ledger and wrote, 7:59 a.m. Borrower requested renewal before apology. Family pressure introduced. Eleanor's name used in sales material. Then I added one more line. Grief being used as collateral. That was the moment something in me finally shifted. When Preston said my wife's name like it belonged in his sales deck, I stopped hearing a business in trouble. I started hearing my grief being used as collateral. After the call with Preston ended, I did not move for a while. The kitchen stayed quiet, except for the refrigerator humming and the soft, ticking clock Eleanor used to complain about. She always said it sounded like a nervous heartbeat. Funny thing is, after someone dies, even the annoying sounds become company. I looked at the ledger, then at the guarantor reminder still glowing on my phone. 7:59 a.m. 1 hour until the bank expected an answer. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway closet where I kept old banking files in gray storage boxes. Retirement teaches a man strange things. You spend decades protecting papers that no longer matter, until one morning they matter more than family dinner ever did. The Bellamy Safe Steps file sat exactly where I remembered. Blue tab, January approval date, my handwriting across the front. Bellamy Safe Steps, guarantor review required. I carried the file back to the kitchen table like something fragile. Maybe it was, because inside that folder was the difference between helping your child and disappearing underneath him. I opened it carefully. Loan agreement, initial projections, vendor estimates, insurance paperwork, then the addendum, annual guarantor review condition. I stared at the pages for a long moment before touching them. The paper had yellowed slightly at the corners. 5 years old. Back when Preston still came over on Sundays with tool catalogs and talked about helping seniors stay in their homes with dignity. Back when Tessa still smiled at me like I was family instead of a financial obstacle. Back when Eleanor was alive. I remembered that meeting clearly. Palmetto Ridge Credit Union. Conference room B. Audrey Pike had been the branch manager even then, younger and sharper around the edges. Diane Harlow sat beside her taking notes while Preston explained the business plan. He was nervous that day. I remember because his knee bounced under the table the same way it did when he was 16, waiting to hear if he passed his driver's test. "Dad," he said afterward in the parking lot, "you really think this can work?" I told him the truth. I think helping older people stay independent will always matter. Then Eleanor squeezed my arm and smiled at him. "That means yes," she said. God, I loved her for making difficult men easier to understand. But even then, I did not sign blindly, because I had seen too many parents ruin themselves confusing support with surrender. So I added conditions, not dramatic ones, practical ones. Money tied to approved operating use only, vendor transparency, annual guarantor review, notification rights if spending categories shifted away from business purpose, and one clause people usually ignored while signing papers they assumed love would protect forever. Guarantor reserves right to decline unrestricted renewal if fund usage materially departs from approved operational intent. Simple sentence, quiet sentence, deadly sentence, if needed. At the time, Preston barely read it. Most borrowers do not study safety rails when they still believe the road is straight. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. I had not written that clause because I expected betrayal. I wrote it because good banking assumes pressure will eventually test good people. And pressure had finally arrived. My phone buzzed. Diane Harlow again. "Mr. Bellamy? I'm here. You asked me to prepare possible controlled disbursement structures." That was Diane's way of saying she had already started building the wall before the flood hit it. "Walk me through it," I said. "If unrestricted renewal is declined," she said carefully, "further discretionary draws freeze pending review. However, verified payroll and approved vendor obligations could still move through controlled disbursement if documentation supports them. Meaning Preston would no longer have open access to spend first and explain later. That line settled deep in me. Spend first and explain later. That was exactly what had happened to my trust. I opened the ledger again. Could card privileges be limited? Yes. Tessa's authorized user access? Potentially suspended pending category review. And the $38,500 draw? Held until supporting documentation is verified. Good. Not because I wanted panic. Because for the first time, the system sounded cleaner than the family conversation. I asked Diane something then that surprised her. "What happens to payroll if I refuse unrestricted renewal?" There was a pause. "You're still thinking about protecting employees." They did not text me to stop begging for attention. That made her laugh softly. First laugh I had heard since my birthday dinner. Tiny thing, still human. Diane lowered her voice. "Mr. Bellamy, I reviewed the spending categories myself this morning. There were several attempts to reclassify non-operational expenses under client education and community engagement. Tessa, I cannot officially speculate." Which meant yes. I rubbed my forehead slowly. I had watched this happen before in smaller ways during my career. Businesses that began helping people slowly turning into machines that helped appearances instead. A dinner becomes networking. A luxury lease becomes visibility. A lie becomes strategy. and eventually the original purpose becomes a framed sentence on the wall, while the money walks somewhere else entirely. Diane, I asked quietly, if Eleanor were sitting at this table, what would you think she'd say? That caught her off guard. When she answered, her voice softened. I think she'd tell you not to confuse kindness with permission. I looked at Eleanor's birthday card again. Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance. Funny how the dead keep talking if you loved them enough. I opened the file one more time. There, clipped behind the agreement, was an old yellow sticky note in Eleanor's handwriting. Kareem, help him build something real, but make sure it stays real. I almost broke then. Not loudly. Old men rarely collapse loudly. We crack in silence. I sat there with my hand over my mouth while the kitchen sunlight moved across the table inch by inch. Then I understood something that hurt worse than Preston's text. My son still believed this was about emotion. He thought I was wounded, sensitive, lonely, punishing him because he skipped dinner. But this had already become larger than a birthday. This was about whether my wife's name would keep being used to decorate spending that betrayed everything she stood for. I picked up my pencil and wrote carefully into the ledger. 18:21 a.m. Unrestricted access no longer aligned with mission. Then underneath it, protect payroll, protect vendors, protect seniors. Do not protect vanity. That line changed me, because revenge born from anger destroys everything nearby. But boundaries born from clarity, those survive courtrooms, holidays, and guilt. Diane spoke again. There's one more thing you should know. What? Preston called twice this morning, asking if the renewal had already been processed automatically. I leaned back slowly. Automatically. Like my signature was furniture. Like my trust was permanent infrastructure. Like fathers never wake up. No, I said quietly. Not this time. I ended the call and closed the file. By then, I finally understood something my son did not. The bank was no longer waiting to see whether I loved him. The bank was waiting to see whether I would keep financing the lie he had built around that love. At 9:17 that morning, I drove to the Bellamy Safe Steps office. I did not call ahead. I did not want the polished version. Families learn to stage manage pain after enough years together. People hide boxes before guests arrive. They lower their voices. They straighten papers. They rehearse kindness 5 minutes before the door opens. I wanted the room before anyone cleaned it. Bellamy Safe Steps sat inside a small strip plaza between a tax office and a vape store that changed names every 6 months. The sign out front still carried the original slogan Preston wrote years ago, helping seniors stay safe at home. That part still sounded honest, which made the rest harder. I parked slowly and sat there for a moment with the engine running. On the passenger seat beside me were 3 things: the ledger, Eleanor's birthday card, and the cupcake box I still had not opened. A ridiculous little trio: paperwork, grief, frosting. That was my whole life lately. When I stepped inside, the office smelled like printer toner, cheap coffee, and fresh paint. Trying too hard to feel modern. Somebody had updated the lobby since my last visit. Brighter walls, new light fixtures, a fake plant near the front desk. Image money. Nora Finch looked up first. Poor Nora always looked like she apologized to doors before opening them. "Mr. Bellamy," she said softly, "I didn't know you were coming." "That makes 2 of us." She gave a nervous little laugh. Then her eyes drifted toward the hallway behind her, and I understood immediately. Tension lives in office buildings the same way humidity lives in South Carolina. You feel it before anyone explains it. I walked farther inside. That was when I saw the wall, a huge framed slogan stretched across the main conference room glass. A safe home lets an older person stand taller. Eleanor Bellamy. My wife's words, 20 feet wide, backlit, turned into branding. I stopped walking. For a second, I genuinely forgot how to breathe correctly. Eleanor had said that sentence one afternoon at the library while helping an older man apply for home assistance after hip surgery. She had not said it for applause. She said it while kneeling beside a folding table with soup stains on the paperwork. Now it glowed above catered chairs and polished brochures, like scripture inside a sales pitch. Nora stepped beside me carefully. Tessa had that installed last month. Installed, like flooring, like lighting, like grief could be mounted professionally. I looked around the office. On one wall sat glossy photos from the Crescent Club dinner. Preston shaking hands, Tessa smiling beside banners, business cards stacked beside little bowls of wrapped candy, and near the copier, 3 unopened vendor envelopes stamped "Past Due." That part mattered more to me than the slogan. I pointed toward the envelopes. "Buck Laramie still waiting?" Nora hesitated. "Yes, sir." "How long?" "A little over 3 weeks." 3 weeks. 3 weeks while money floated through floral deposits and event lighting. I walked slowly through the office while Nora followed me with the exhausted posture of someone who spent too much time protecting other people's explanations. Then I noticed another board hanging near the scheduling desk. Installation delays. Several names were listed underneath. Grab bars postponed. Bathroom rail waiting on inventory. Ramp installation rescheduled. One line had a handwritten note beside it. "Mrs. Paulson fell again. Priority when materials arrive." That one hit me hard. Not loudly, just deep. I stared at the note while Eleanor's slogan glowed behind me like something holy, being rented by the hour. Nora lowered her voice. "Mrs. Paulson keeps calling. She's scared to use the shower alone." I nodded slowly. There it was, the real business. Not the banners, not the networking dinner. An old woman afraid of slipping in her bathroom while my son spent money making success look prettier than it was. Then I heard heels coming down the hallway. Tessa. She froze the moment she saw me. That polished smile appeared automatically, though slightly crooked around the edges. "Kareem," she said brightly, "you should have told us you were stopping by." I wanted the honest version first. The smile tightened. Preston came out behind her carrying his phone and a folder. The second he saw the ledger under my arm, his shoulders changed. Not guilt, calculation. "Dad," he said carefully, "this isn't really a good morning for surprises." "Funny," I answered. "That's exactly what the bank said." Nobody laughed. Tessa folded her arms. "If this is about the renewal, we already explained the spending strategy." I looked back at Eleanor's quote on the wall. "My wife's words are not a spending strategy." Preston rubbed his forehead. "Dad, the quote helps people trust the mission." "The mission should do that." His jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw the younger Preston again. The nervous kid with sketches and supplier lists asking whether his business mattered. Then it vanished under stress and pride. "You don't understand how hard we're pushing right now," he said. "We finally have momentum." Momentum toward what? He looked around the office. "Growth." I pointed toward the delay board. "That woman waiting for rails doesn't care about growth." Tessa stepped in immediately. "Kareem, this is exactly the problem. You still think like a compliance officer instead of a business owner." "No," I said quietly. "I think like someone who remembers what the business was supposed to be." That landed harder than I expected. Preston's face changed. Not shame, fatigue. A man tired of being measured against the version of himself that once meant well. Then Wes Dalton walked in through the side office door. Perfect timing. Men like Wes always appear when money gets nervous. He carried a tablet under one arm and spoke before fully entering the room. "Preston, I just got another message from the bank about—" He stopped when he saw me. The temperature shifted instantly. Wes recovered fast. "Mr. Bellamy." "Wes." He nodded toward the delay board. "We're working through temporary cash flow pressure." Temporary. Another soft word. I had heard hundreds of them across my career. Temporary pressure, temporary transfer, temporary access. People love temporary when they hope consequences arrive permanently late. I looked at Preston. You used your mother's name in the pitch deck too, didn't you? Silence. That answered it. Finally, Preston said, her story connects with clients. I stared at him. No anger left. That was the frightening part. Only clarity. Your mother helped seniors read the truth, I said. She did not lend her memory to decorate debt. Tessa exhaled sharply. This is unfair. No, I answered. This is documented. Wes shifted uncomfortably. Nora looked down at the floor. And Preston lost patience. You know what? He snapped. Maybe you like this. The room went still. He pointed toward the ledger. The meetings, the reviews, the bank calls. Maybe you like being needed. That sentence landed harder than the birthday text because it tried to turn love into vanity. Like my years helping him were not sacrifice, but appetite. I looked at my son for a very long time. Then I looked up at Eleanor's glowing quote stretched across the wall. And suddenly, I understood the ugliest part of all this. The guarantee was no longer protecting the business. It was protecting the image of the business. The illusion, the polished version of success, standing on top of unpaid rails, delayed installations, and a father expected to sign quietly from the shadows. I turned toward the door. Dad! Preston called after me. I stopped. For 1 second. I truly hoped he would say something human, something real. Instead, he asked, So, what are you going to tell the bank? I closed my eyes briefly. Then I walked out carrying the ledger, the birthday card, and the last piece of softness I still had left for him. Because by then, I finally understood something terrifying. If I signed that renewal now, I would not be saving my son's business. I would be financing the lie wearing my wife's face. I did not call the bank back immediately after leaving the office. I drove instead. No music, no destination at first. Just Greenville traffic sliding past the windshield while my mind replayed Preston's voice over and over again. Maybe you like being needed. That sentence stayed with me because it carried a kind of cruelty only family knows how to sharpen. Strangers insult your character. Family insults your motives. I stopped near Falls Park and sat in the parking lot watching people walk beside the river. Young couples, office workers holding coffee cups. A woman pushing an older man in a wheelchair while he pointed at ducks like he had never seen them before. Normal life, that was the painful thing. The world never pauses because your child disappointed you. I took Eleanor's birthday card out again. The fold had softened from years in my pocket. I read her handwriting twice. Then I finally called Diane Harlow. She answered immediately. I hoped you'd call. I'm ready, I said. There was no drama in my voice anymore, just exhaustion and clarity. Diane spoke carefully. If unrestricted renewal is declined, the system triggers immediately. Open discretionary access freezes. Pending draw requests halt. Compliance review activates on category mismatches. Do it. A pause. Mr. Bellamy, are you certain? I looked out through the windshield at the river moving under the bridge. No, I said honestly. But certainty is not the requirement anymore. Then I added, responsibility is. Diane exhaled slowly. All right. I heard keyboard clicks in the background. Small sounds, tiny sounds. But those little clicks changed my son's morning more than any argument we had ever had. She continued speaking while processing the review hold. Controlled payroll protection remains available pending documentation. Verified vendors can still be paid directly upon approval. Good. That mattered to me. I wanted accountability, not collapse. There is a difference. Revenge destroys randomly. Boundaries aim carefully. Diane lowered her voice. The system will also suspend questionable category activity until review completion. Tessa's access too? Yes? I nodded once. No anger, just consequence. Then Diane said something that made me sit upright. There's already activity happening. What kind? Multiple login attempts from Preston's account. He may have received preliminary alerts. I checked the time. 9:43 a.m. fast. Faster than I expected, because Preston was not waiting for the bank to contact him anymore. He was already watching the door shake beneath him. I thanked Diane quietly and ended the call. Then I sat there beside the river, feeling absolutely no triumph at all. That surprised me. People imagine revenge feels hot, victorious. But real betrayal usually leaves you cold first, especially when the person panicking is still your child. My phone rang 6 minutes later. Preston, I answered calmly. What happened? He demanded immediately. No hello, no father, only emergency. What do you mean? The bank froze the draw. There it was. Not Dad. Are you okay? Not. Why are you upset? The draw. Always the draw. I leaned back in the seat. The bank activated review conditions. You told them to do this? I told them not to ignore the agreement. Dad, payroll processes tomorrow. Then provide documentation. You don't understand. That almost made me smile sadly. A son screaming, "You don't understand," at a retired compliance officer who wrote the very clause stopping him. I understand perfectly, I said. I heard noise in the background, office voices, phones ringing. Then Tessa came onto the line sharply. Kareem, this is insane. No, I answered. It's audited. You're humiliating Preston over one dinner. One dinner. Amazing how small people make the wound when they need something from you. This stopped being about dinner when company money started dressing up as vanity. That's business development. No, I said quietly. It's borrowed image. Silence. Then Preston's voice returned, rougher now. You're destroying everything Mom and I built. That sentence hit hard because it twisted Eleanor into the argument again. I closed my eyes briefly. Your mother built dignity, I said. You built banners, he snapped. You think small, Dad. That's the problem. You still think like somebody balancing forms in the back office while the rest of us are trying to grow. I let him finish, because angry people eventually reveal the truth hiding underneath their polished language. You know what? He continued. Maybe this company outgrew you. There it was, the real fear. Not that I would abandon him, that he no longer wanted the kind of father who asked difficult questions. He wanted a signature, preferably silent. I said only one thing before hanging up. If the business truly outgrew honesty, then it deserves this review. Then I ended the call. For several minutes, my phone kept vibrating. Preston, Tessa. Unknown numbers from the office. I ignored them all. At 10:11 a.m., Maisie texted me. Grandpa, Dad's freaking out. People from the bank keep calling him. I stared at the message. Then another one came. He yelled because his business card stopped working at the gas station. That one nearly broke my heart. Not because of Preston, because Maisie should never have been close enough to witness adult panic shaped like entitlement. I replied carefully. None of this is your fault, sweetheart. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then came her final message. Mom says you're punishing Dad because you're lonely. I looked at those words for a long time. Funny thing about loneliness, people only mock it after benefiting from your love. At 10:26 a.m., Diane called again. Mr. Bellamy? Yes? There have been 42 inbound contact attempts from Preston Bellamy to various bank departments since review activation. 42. I almost laughed from pure disbelief. 42 missed calls to payroll support, commercial review, card services, branch operations, emergency lending, compliance escalation. 42. My son ignored one birthday message from his father and spent the entire morning begging strangers to answer him. Diane continued carefully. He's requesting immediate override authority. And We declined pending documentation. Good. Not because I wanted him trapped, because for once, the rules were forcing him to stand still long enough to look at what he had become. I drove home around noon. The cupcake still sat on the kitchen table exactly where I left it. The frosting had started cracking slightly around the edges. Old sugar hardens when left alone too long. I understood the feeling. My phone buzzed again. Preston this time, but not yelling anymore. That frightened me more. His voice sounded smaller. Tessa's card got declined. I said nothing. She's saying people saw it happen. Still nothing. Then finally, Dad, what am I supposed to do? There it was. Not anger, not branding, not growth strategy. Fear. Real fear. And for one dangerous second, I almost rescued him again. Then my eyes landed on Eleanor's birthday card. Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance. I realized something terrible then. Every time I rescued Preston without conditions, I taught him my dignity could survive being postponed. That lesson had nearly destroyed us both. So, I answered softly, you start by telling the truth about the business you built. And when I hung up, I understood the next conversation would not happen over the phone. It would happen at the bank, in front of documents, in front of witnesses, and for the first time in his life, my son was about to learn what my signature actually cost. The meeting happened at Palmetto Ridge Credit Union just after noon the next day. Same building where Preston first pitched Bellamy Safe Steps 5 years earlier. Funny how life circles back to the exact room where trust began, just to measure how much survived. I arrived early, old habit again. The lobby smelled like printer paper, and coffee burned slightly too long on a warming plate. Familiar smell, safe smell. The kind of smell that once made me feel useful instead of tired. Audrey Pike met me near the conference hall. She wore the same calm expression good branch managers develop after years handling panic disguised as urgency. Mr. Bellamy, she said quietly. Audrey. She glanced toward the closed conference room doors. They're already here. Of course they were. People arrive early when they think they can still control the story. I walked in carrying 3 things under my arm: the ledger, the guarantor file, and Eleanor's birthday card. That last one surprised Audrey slightly. Good. I wanted someone else to see it. Inside the conference room sat Preston, Tessa, Wes Dalton, Diane Harlow, and Nora Finch. Nora looked like she had not slept. Wes looked irritated. Tessa looked polished, but brittle around the eyes. And Preston looked scared. Not theatrically scared, not manipulative scared, real fear. His phone sat face down on the table beside a stack of papers. Every few seconds it vibrated again. 42 missed calls had turned into something worse now. Consequences with names attached. Payroll review, vendor escalation, commercial compliance, card services, reality. Nobody spoke immediately when I entered. Then Preston stood. Dad, no, Audrey said gently. Let's do this properly. That sentence mattered, because for once, the room was not organized around emotion. It was organized around documentation. I sat down slowly and opened the ledger. Diane began first. As of yesterday morning, unrestricted guarantor renewal was declined under annual review condition protocol due to material departure from approved operational intent. Tessa interrupted immediately. That language makes it sound criminal. Diane did not even blink. It makes it sound documented. Beautiful sentence, cold sentence, true sentence. Wes leaned forward. We had growth expenses. That's normal. Audrey slid several printed statements across the table. Growth expenses are not the issue. Classification mismatch is. She pointed calmly. Crescent Club dining, event lighting, brand photography, vehicle wrap deposit, private catering, multiple category inconsistencies connected to operational credit use. Preston rubbed both hands over his face. You're acting like we stole money. No, I said quietly. I'm acting like you forgot whose name opened the account. That landed hard. The room went silent again. Diane continued. The guarantor condition specifically allows review intervention when approved senior accessibility operational intent materially shifts toward discretionary image expenditure. Tessa laughed once under her breath. Image expenditure. Listen to this room. I looked directly at her. You installed my wife's quote on a backlit wall while vendor invoices sat unpaid. Her jaw tightened instantly. No answer this time, because there wasn't one. Audrey slid another paper forward. Pending draw request for $38,500 lacked supporting vendor documentation at time of submission. Preston spoke quickly. We were finalizing the contract. With whom? Audrey asked. Silence. Then Wes answered instead. Potential senior living expansion opportunity. Documented where? Another silence. The problem with pressure-built lies is that they require speed. Banking rooms move slower. Slowness kills bad stories. Nora finally spoke up softly. The funds were supposed to stabilize operating pressure before the next sales cycle. Everybody turned toward her. Poor Nora looked like she regretted honesty immediately after speaking it. But the truth was already in the room now. Stabilize operating pressure, meaning payroll panic, vendor delays, cash flow strain hidden beneath branding. I opened Eleanor's birthday card carefully and laid it beside the ledger. Nobody expected that, especially Preston. His face changed the second he saw it. Dad, you know where I was while you were at Crescent Club? His eyes dropped. I continued calmly. I sat alone in a diner with one cupcake while my son told me to stop begging for attention. Tessa shifted uncomfortably. Wes looked away. And for the first time since this started, Preston looked ashamed instead of defensive. Good. Shame meant the truth had finally entered him somewhere deeper than finance. Diane spoke gently. The review board approved controlled continuation options. Preston looked up immediately. What does that mean? It means verified payroll and approved vendor obligations may continue under direct review. Relief flooded his face. Then Diane finished the sentence. However, unrestricted discretionary access remains suspended. Tessa sat upright sharply. What about the cards? Authorized user discretionary privileges are frozen pending category review. Her expression cracked. Finally, not rage, fear. Public embarrassment had reached her personally now. My card declined yesterday at lunch because of this, she said quietly. Nobody answered, because yes, that was exactly why. Audrey folded her hands. Bellamy Safe Steps may continue operating under restricted compliance structure if corrective documentation and operational transparency are provided. Wes leaned back heavily. So, basically the bank owns us now. No, I said softly. The bank finally asked who the money belonged to. That room changed after I said that. Something invisible shifted. Because suddenly this was no longer about paperwork. It was about ownership of sacrifice, ownership of trust, ownership of Eleanor's name. Preston stared down at the table for a long time. Then finally, he asked the question that mattered most. What happens now? I answered before anyone else could. Now you stop pretending appearance is the same thing as purpose. His eyes lifted slowly toward me. I continued. You wanted the business to look successful before it became stable. You wanted people to admire growth before you respected the work underneath it. Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because even she knew I was right now. I slid the birthday card toward Preston. Your mother wrote this years ago. He touched it carefully. The room stayed silent while he read her handwriting. Don't let anyone make your quiet heart feel like a nuisance. His face broke slightly after that. Not dramatically, just enough for me to see the boy he used to be under the businessman he had performed for too long. Then he whispered, I didn't think it had gotten this bad. I believed him, That was the tragedy. People rarely notice the exact day survival turns into vanity. It happens gradually, dinner by dinner, charge by charge, excuse by excuse. Until one morning, the bank starts asking questions your father already knew the answers to. Audrey closed the file gently. Compliance terms will be delivered formally this afternoon. The meeting was over, but nobody moved yet. Finally, Preston looked at me and asked the one thing I had waited all week to hear. Not about the loan, not about payroll, about me. "Dad, were you really alone on your birthday?" I held his gaze for several seconds, then answered honestly, "Yes." That word hit him harder than every frozen account in the building, and as I stood up to leave, I realized something painful. The bank had frozen his access yesterday morning, but only now had my son truly understood what losing something felt like. 3 months after the bank meeting, the Bellamy Safe Steps office looked different. Smaller somehow. Not physically, spiritually. The giant backlit slogan with Eleanor's quote was gone. Preston took it down himself after compliance required a full operational review on all branding materials connected to discretionary spending. Nora told me he stood staring at the wall for almost 10 minutes before removing it. Good. Some lessons should take time. The business survived, but not comfortably. That mattered too. Real correction is supposed to ache a little. The unrestricted credit access never returned. Payroll and approved vendor payments moved through controlled review for months. Buck Laramie finally got paid. Mrs. Paulson got her bathroom rails installed 3 weeks later. Nora sent me a picture. The old woman stood beside the rail smiling like somebody had handed her confidence instead of metal. That picture meant more to me than any balance sheet ever had. Tessa stopped appearing in the office every day after her authorized card access was removed. Funny how quickly branding strategy becomes less exciting when somebody else is no longer financing it quietly. I do not say that with cruelty, only honesty. As for Preston, well, fear changed him first, then embarrassment, then silence. Real change takes longer. For several weeks he called often, but not to argue anymore. Mostly short conversations. Questions about vendors, compliance procedures, documentation rules. The strange thing was, he finally started listening to answers he once called outdated. One evening, he came to my house carrying a paper grocery bag and stood awkwardly on the porch like a teenager returning home after breaking curfew. "I brought dinner," he said. I looked inside the bag. 2 burgers, fries, 1 cupcake, blue sprinkles. That nearly hurt worse than the birthday itself. We ate quietly at the kitchen table. No speeches, no dramatic apology, just 2 tired men sitting inside the consequences of pride. Halfway through the meal, Preston finally spoke. "I really thought growth would fix everything." I nodded slowly. "That's the dangerous thing about growth," I said. "It hides problems by making them look temporary." He stared down at the fries. Then he whispered something I never expected to hear from him. "When Mom died, I got scared." That opened the real wound at last. Not the loan, not the bank. Grief. Preston admitted the business stopped feeling like a mission after Eleanor passed away. It became pressure instead. Survival, expansion, image. Every month he feared losing momentum, so he spent more money trying to look stable than actually becoming stable. Then people started praising appearances. The dinners, the banners, the growth talk. And slowly, he began believing visibility mattered more than purpose. I listened quietly. Because older men eventually learn something painful. People rarely become selfish all at once. Most of the time, they drift there, one compromise at a time, while convincing themselves it's temporary. Before leaving that night, Preston looked at Eleanor's birthday card sitting near the lamp. She really wrote that? Yes. She always knew exactly what to say. No, I told him softly. She just knew what people were afraid to admit. That stayed with him. I could see it. Now, I need to be honest with you. This story did not end with perfect healing. Some viewers want that, a big apology, crying in the driveway, family hugging under warm music while every wound magically closes before credits roll. Life rarely works that way. I forgave my son carefully, but I did not restore everything. The unrestricted guarantor agreement stayed gone permanently. Tessa never regained financial authority inside the company, and I added a third-party compliance condition to every future renewal review connected to Bellamy Safe Steps. Not because I hated Preston, because love without boundaries eventually teaches people your dignity is negotiable. That lesson nearly destroyed both of us. A few months later, I used part of my retirement savings to start something small in Eleanor's memory. The Eleanor Safe Steps Fund, nothing flashy, no banners, no growth dinners. Just practical help for seniors who could not afford small safety installations. Grab bars, ramps, shower rails, basic repairs, quiet things that keep older people standing safely in homes they spent their lives building. The first volunteer form Preston filled out himself. No cameras, no speeches, just paperwork. Honestly, that mattered more to me than any apology could have. Sometimes redemption is not a sentence, it is repetition. Showing up correctly long enough for trust to breathe again. And sometimes the most painful thing a parent must learn is this: your child can love you and still treat you carelessly when fear, pride, and money begin speaking louder than gratitude. That does not mean you stop loving them, but it does mean you stop financing the version of them that hurts everyone nearby. I still keep Eleanor's birthday card in the kitchen drawer beside my old ledger. And every year now, on my birthday, I buy myself one cupcake with blue sprinkles. Not because I feel lonely anymore, because I finally understand something my wife tried to teach me for years. A quiet heart is not a nuisance, and a signature should never cost a person their dignity. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and for listening to this painful chapter of my life. Please tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I always wonder how far these stories travel, and who might need them tonight. And if this story moved you even a little, please consider subscribing to Final Act Revenge. Another story is waiting for you on your screen right now. YouTube believes you may enjoy it, so maybe give it a chance.